Hello everyone and welcome back to another My Porch Prints crafting tutorial. Today we are going to be going over 6 different paper distressing techniques as well as crafting a small distressed booklet. So the 6 techniques we will be covering today are distress ink, Sharpie ink, coffee and tea dyeing with an oven, dip dyeing, no heat coffee dyeing, and page burning. Alright, so the first technique we will be covering is distress ink. This is a product that you can pick up at most craft stores like Michael's. I know carries several different varieties. They come in multiple colors such as green and pink, and you can also find this online, so we will go ahead and put a link to that down in the description below. However, if you kind of aren't interested in inking, you could skip the process altogether by just printing out some papers that already look distressed. We have some in our Coffee and Script printable papers kit if that's what you're looking for, but I'm going to go ahead and be using these to show how to ink using distress ink, because I kind of think that it looks good when you take a distressed piece of paper and add a little bit more to it just to make it extra authentic. But again, if you don't have any kind of distressing method that I'm using in this video, you can always just pre-print out a pre-distressed looking piece of paper. So to get started, we're going to go ahead and take a little bit of distress ink on a sponge. I got these makeup sponges at Walmart, but you can also find them at the dollar store. They're really, really cheap and easy to use. And the first method is to kind of hold it at an angle and just sort of drag it along the edge if you're looking to cover a small bit of the edge, not actually color the entire piece of paper. Or you can go ahead and drag it further along the edge inward toward the center of the paper to make a heavier, darker, almost burnt look. This is the technique that I ended up using on my distressed booklet that we are putting together later. But if you want a more subtle effect, you can go ahead and just wipe off the excess ink and just go ahead and lightly run the sponge down the edge. This creates a much softer stain versus using a heavy amount of ink on the sponge. So I'm going to go ahead and add some ink to the center. I think it helps create more of an authentic stained look to the piece. And here you can compare the extra distressed paper to the one that we just printed off. It kind of just has a slightly more distressed look to it. But if you don't have distressed ink lying around, you can go ahead and take a brown Sharpie. This one was a little more red than I was expecting, but I actually kind of liked how it looked and might have used this on something like our kitchen kit or perhaps a rose-themed junk journal. And it doesn't spread as smooth, but it still works in a pinch if that's what you have lying around. Next, I'm going to be showing you coffee dyeing using these CD cases. You can also use tea or coffee, it doesn't really matter, but you'll probably see these in a lot of our projects because we really like the way that coffee and tea dyeing looks. And you can tell it makes a really big difference compared to regular printer paper. But again, our Coffee and Script printable papers kit has papers that look just like this if you don't have the time. However, if you do have the time, I would recommend using a dark stained English breakfast tea, something that's dark brown, not like a green tea, or using coffee because it's already naturally really dark brown. So this is what I will be using today. So I'm going to just take a small plastic bowl and pour a little bit of fresh coffee in it. It doesn't seem to matter if the coffee is hot or cold. It's more about how long you leave it in that will determine how dark the color is. And I will just be submerging our little CD case into the coffee. It's a bit hot, so I ended up using a bone folder to press it in so I didn't have to burn my fingers. And I went ahead and submerged the entire piece of paper so that it had a stained effect, at least all over the whole thing and no white showing. But if you get pools of coffee like you see here, that's actually going to help with the stained effect, so don't worry about it being super even. And we're just going to take a regular baking sheet and we're going to bake this at 250 degrees for about 5 minutes. However, please be careful while you're doing this and don't leave it unattended even for 5 minutes, just in case of fire, so take all the necessary precautions when doing so. However, if you're not interested in working with heat, I'm going to be showing you a few ways of coffee dyeing paper that don't use any heat. And I'm going to go ahead and show you that by starting to make our little distressed booklet. So you can kind of see here, this is what I made previously, and we're going to try to mimic this style with our own booklet that we're putting together. And all of these pages were made using non-heat dyeing methods, and it takes a little bit more time, but not much, and it's a little bit safer, so it's how I prefer to do it. So we're going to start with this pocket sketchbook that I picked up from Walmart for under $2. It's really small and easy to use, so I liked it a lot and I picked up several. When you take the plastic off, there is a little bit of this stickiness left on the cover, but it comes off with just a little bit of water, and the pages are already slightly yellow, so we don't have to do as much work to try to get them to look aged. So you're going to need a empty bottle. I also got this from Walmart for under $1. Just a little empty spray bottle, but you can also empty like an old perfume bottle or something like that. And we're going to fill it up with that coffee that we used earlier. And we're just going to go ahead and start spraying the pages, making sure that we get the fronts and the back of each page. Make sure that they are fully covered. I like to do a little bit of variation when I am coloring them though, just to make sure that there is some contrast and some very distinct stains that show up on the page. If you close the book before they dry, you'll kind of get like a ink blot effect on both of the pages. So if you want them to be very distinct from one another, you'll want to let them dry in between. But giving this contrast to the page helps the book look a little more authentic. And another way that I create interesting effects is by closing the book and spraying between the closed pages to create these drips. The whole point of adding all this variation is just to make it look a little more authentic, making sure everything's a little different. And just make sure that you let those dry before closing the book, or you might get a more smeared look rather than a drip. And I'm just going to go ahead and open the pages and really saturate them to make sure that they are fully covered. And I'm going to go ahead and make some creases in the book as well, just to add some character. And how you do that is you go ahead and saturate the cover with coffee, make sure it's very wet, and I'm just going to sort of fold it in the middle and crease it. Doesn't have to be too perfect. Again, we're trying to make this look natural. So go ahead and squeeze the book shut and press hard to sort of cement the crease in the paper. And there you have it, a nice little crease in your paper. Another technique is dip dyeing. So I'm just going to take the book and turn it sideways so that the pages are submerged, just the tips of the pages in the coffee. And if you shake the coffee around a little bit, it's going to give you a little bit more of a unique pattern to the pages. And while this is happening and I'm submerging the other side of the paper, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that all the pages are again saturated with coffee to make sure that the color comes out dark enough. And while it's wet, I'm also going to bend some of the pages to give them sort of a wrinkled effect and make sure that they have a little more character to them. And don't worry if the papers rip a little bit. Again, that just adds to the distressed effect. I like adding these little waves to the book. I just think it gives them a little more character, makes them look a little more realistic. Again, you don't have to do this if you like your pages flat, but I like to add them to mine because when they're done, you get this really nice wrinkled effect that I think just makes the books look a little more distressed. So when the dip dye is done, we're going to take it out and this is what it should look like. The speckled wave pattern was caused by shaking the container and splashing the coffee up the side of the page. So if you want it to have that kind of varied look, that's something you'll want to do. And I went ahead and dried the book with a hairdryer, which took about 5 or 10 minutes. So I didn't have to use an oven and I still got this dark stained effect. They look pretty similar, and this way I didn't have to worry too much about something accidentally catching fire in the oven. So if that's not something you feel comfortable with, this is definitely a good alternative. And I went ahead and used distress ink on the edges of all of my pages, as well as the edge of the entire booklet and the inner spine of the pages, just because I wanted to give it a bit of a darker stain. And I went ahead and created these sort of faux tears in the pages using distress ink and the very edge of the sponge. And to do that, you simply just pull the sponge down the page using the very thin edge of the tip of the sponge. And as you come back up, sort of pull away from it at an angle to create kind of a triangular shape. And this will just sort of give you a fake tear in the paper. Again, you just drag the ink up the page in a straight line and go out at an angle as you come down. Just another way to add a little more character to the book. Now, this next step is for those of you interested in adding a little bit of color to your book. I went ahead and did this with the first book I made, but I'm not doing it with the second one just because I wanted them to look a little different from one another. But if you are wanting to add a little color, it's really simple. I just go ahead and take that spray bottle from earlier that has the coffee in it, and I'm going to be adding a little bit of red paint. This is just simple acrylic paint and a little bit of blue. It's sort of like a blue-gray colored paint. And if you want the color to be really subtle, you can go ahead and add 1 drop of each. And if you want it a bit darker, you can add 2. I went ahead and used 2 drops of each for this particular color. And I'm just going to shake it up to make sure it's well mixed with the coffee. I found that this actually comes out of the spray bottle really easily and cleans up nicely, so don't worry too much about the spray bottle getting ruined or something. And I just spray the page with the color, and I think it adds a nice interest and variation to the stained paper. Gotta go ahead and give it a shake and kind of let those drips come down. And when it's dry, you should have something like this. And I thought this would work really well for somebody who maybe wants to use the watercolor papers like we have in our Birds and Nest kit or our Butterfly Cards and Pockets kit. But again, you can also just leave it plain. And when I was looking at this, I decided the cover looked a little too perfect and didn't match the pages, so I'm going to go ahead and just crush it. And I know this looks really violent, and it kind of is, but I wanted to make sure that the page had plenty of wrinkles and crinkles so that it matched the overall look of the book. Again, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I was going for a specific distressed look, so went ahead and wrinkled it up nicely. And I also thought the cover had a little too much shine to it. So to get rid of that shine, I'm going to go ahead and use a small piece of sandpaper and just go ahead and brush the cover and spine to try to give it a few scratches and take away a little bit of that shine. To have deeper, bigger scratches, you're just going to push a little bit harder, and to have lighter scratches, you don't press so hard. It's pretty simple, but I think it makes a difference, especially in bright light. And I'm going to go ahead and make a few holes in the cover. I used scissors and just sort of tore at it and then added some ink and coffee. And when you're done, it will actually kind of come through the page and create sort of a dark stain. I really like the way that it looked, almost kind of like a burn mark. And if you're not interested in actually burning your pages, you can always tear them and sort of ink the edges, and that'll give you a similar look. But we're going to go ahead and actually burn these pages in this tutorial, and I'm going to show you 2 different methods for burning the page to create sort of a lighter burn look and a darker burn look. And again, while doing this, make sure that you're using proper safety precautions. I went ahead and used a metal sink that had water and also a fire extinguisher nearby, just in case anything happens. And the first method we're going to use is we're going to burn the page and then blow it out, sort of allowing it to burn until it's the right size that you kind of want for your page. And we're going to just blow out gently until the flame is gone. And it'll give you sort of this thin burnt line. It's pretty subtle, but you can still tell it's a burn. And the second technique is to, again, just like the first, burn the page, but instead of blowing it out, we're actually going to run it under running water. And this is going to create a much darker, inky stained burn compared to the first one. You can sort of see the difference here. And I ended up using both styles of burn throughout my book, but you can use just one if you prefer. And a third method is actually to burn in the center of the paper to kind of add like these dark scorch marks. And you can also go ahead and if you hold it there long enough, it'll burn straight through the paper and kind of give you a burnt hole in the center of the page. And I went ahead and just ran it under cold water. Go ahead and give it that darker stained appearance. And this is what that looks like. Now I'm going to go ahead and burn several other pages off camera, but you get an idea of the process. Just make sure you're being safe throughout the whole process of burning your book. And please do not burn the cover. It is made of a plastic material that smells terrible, and I do not think it is safe to burn. So when burning, only burn the paper. But yeah, this is the finished product. I think it looks really nice just as a decorative piece on a shelf or as a small booklet to add to your own journals, however you'd like to use it. I do hope you found this tutorial helpful, and if you did, please remember to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!